Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Fraggoth Reads. I should probably come up with another title. Um, I am your intrepid narrator, Fraggoth, and today we are going to be reading more of Endymion by Dan Simmons. Pictured here is one of the multiple Japanese covers by one... Oh, Jesus, what's his name? Something Orai. What is your name, dude? Noriyoshi Orai. A very vibrant color palette. Anyway, as I click and click and click, there we go. So previously on, the big thing that happened is that Aenea basically comes up with a brilliant gamble for what they will do to escape Father Captain de Soya, Gregorius, Key, and Rettig. When they get to Parvati system. And that is to basically say, basically gamble that the Pax want her alive. For whatever reason they want her alive. Even though they've said she's like a viral threat, but they've also said, no, bring her back alive. Which is about the only thing that has our boy Federico de Soya going along with it, because he's like, I don't know about this kidnapping kids thing. That seems pretty messed up. But no, she's supposed to have some sort of a virus from the techno core. And that's bad. So her gamble is to basically say, hey, if you touch the ship, if you try to get in and to steal me, I'm going to have it vent atmosphere, and it will kill me. Meanwhile, Raul, Endymion, and Bettik are hiding behind the piano that she, incidentally, is playing on when she's making this pronouncement to them, which is, I think they call a power move. It's a hell of a power move. So de Soya's like, nope, not taking that chance. Don't want her blood on my hands. Don't want the disappointment. I can handle the disappointment of letting her slip through my fingers again, a second time. I can take that better than killing her, because at least the other way I have a chance to get at her. Bonus for him, though, is that they are heading for Renaissance Vector. Aenea is headed for Renaissance Vector, which is a bit of a Pax stronghold and staging area. It is one of their most fortified locations outside of the Vatican. Certainly in... I don't know how outbacky it is at this point, because I can't remember where in the galaxy it is relative to Pacem. Suffice it to say, it is a major staging area. A lot of people come through there. So they are really headed into the Hornet's Nest. So de Soya has to come up with a plan to get her without killing her. And also probably come up with something in case the Shrike shows up, because that thing has managed to be a consistent menace anytime it appears. It hasn't appeared more than the once, well, okay, thousands of times. Once to thousands of times in this book so far. We will be seeing it again. Fret not. Let's see, anything else salient that I can think of? Mostly it's, Raul recounting the joys of space travel. And Aenea, learning more about him than him about her, to be honest. But, getting to know more about her as a person. I think that's it. I think we're ready to start. It will probably be a shorter one this week, not one of these 3.5 hour long affairs, because I'm tapped from yesterday. So, a little bit shorter this week. Well, today, I should say. I keep saying this week because I'm like already I'm still dry programmed from my previous format. As soon as I'm able to have like a consistent regular schedule, I will keep to it. But until then, it is going to be whenever I have time, and I realize that makes people predicting when to tune in near impossible. I will try to give at least a week's heads up warning, or several days heads up warning on the Discord, but it is going to be difficult to do otherwise. I really have to get around to editing my boilerplate part of the stream description as well as my channel descriptions to reflect that, unfortunately. I keep hoping in vain that I'll be able to lock down something more consistent. I'll find out more in the next day or two if I'll be able to do that. Anyway, without further ado, let's get down to the Endymioning. Yeah. Yes, that is what we shall do. Without further ado. He's still a-doing it. "26. During the 142 days that Father Captain de Soya waits for the girl to enter Renaissance system, he dreams about her every night. He sees her clearly as she was when first encountered at the Sphinx on Hyperion, willow-thin, eyes alert but not terrified despite the sandstorm and threatening figures before her, her small hands partially raised as if ready to cover her face or rush forward to hug him. Often in his dreams she is his daughter, and they are walking the crowded canal streets of Renaissance Vector, discussing de Soya's older sister, Maria, who has been sent to the St. Jude Medical Center in Da Vinci. In his dreams, de Soya and the child walk hand in hand through the familiar canal streets near the huge medical complex, while he explains to her how he plans to save his sister's life this time, how he will not allow Maria to die the way she had the first time. In reality, Federico de Soya has been 6 standard years old when he and his family came to Renaissance Vector from their isolated region of Llano Estacado on their provincial world of Madre de Dios. Almost everyone on the sparsely populated stone and desert world was Catholic, but not Pax born-again Catholic. The de Soya family had been part of the breakaway Mariaist movement, and had left Nuevo Madrid more than a century earlier when that world had voted to join the Pax and have all its Christian churches submit to the Vatican. The Mariaists venerated the Holy Mother of Christ more than Vatican orthodoxy allowed, so young Federico had grown up on a marginal desert world with its devout colony of 60,000 heretical Catholics who would not accept the cruciform as a form of protest. Then, 12-year-old Maria had become sick with an off-world retrovirus that swept like a scythe through the colony ranching region. Most sufferers of the Red Death either died within 32 hours or recovered, but Maria had lingered, her once beautiful features all but obscured by the terrible crimson stigmata. The family had taken her to the hospital in Ciudad del Madre. Oh, I just got lost. The family had taken her to the hospital in Ciudad del Madre on the windswept southern reach of Llano Estacado, but Mariaist medics there could do nothing but pray. There was a new Pax born-again Christian mission in Ciudad del Madre, discriminated against but tolerated by the locals, and a priest there, a kindly man named Father Mayer, begged Federico's father to allow their dying child to accept the cruciform.
Federico was too young to remember the details of his parents' agonized discussions, but he did remember the entire family, his mother and father, his other two sisters and younger brother, all on their knees in the Mariaist church there, begging for the Holy Mother's guidance and intercession. It was the other ranchers of the Llano Estacado Cooperative who raised the money to send the entire family off-world to one of the famous medical centers on Renaissance Vector. While his brother and the other sisters were left behind with a neighboring ranch family, for some reason 6-year-old Federico was chosen to accompany his parents and dying sister on the long voyage. It was everyone's first experience with actual cold sleep, more dangerous but cheaper than cryonic fugue, and de Soya later remembered the chill in his bones that seemed to last through their weeks on Renaissance Vector. At first, the Pax medics in Da Vinci seemed to arrest the spread of the Red Death through Maria's system, even banishing some of the bleeding stigmata, but then, after 3 local weeks, the retrovirus again gained the upper hand. Once again, a Pax priest, in this case several who were on the staff of the hospital, beseeched de Soya's parents to bend their Mariaist principles and allow the dying child to accept the cruciform before it was too late. Later, as he entered adulthood, de Soya could better imagine the agonies of such a decision, the death of one's deepest beliefs, or the death of one's child. In his dream, where Aenea is his daughter and they are walking the canal streets near the medical center, he describes to her how Maria had given him her most prized possession, a tiny porcelain sculpture of a unicorn, just hours before she had slipped into a coma. In his dream, he walks with the 11-year-old Hyperion girl's small hand in his, and tells her how his father, a strong man in both body and belief, had finally surrendered and asked for the Pax priests to administer the sacrament of the cross to his daughter. The priests at the hospital agreed, but insisted that de Soya's parents and Federico formally convert to Universal Catholicism before Maria could receive her cruciform. De Soya explains to his daughter, Aenea, how he remembers the brief rebaptism ceremony at the local cathedral, St. John the Divine, where he and his parents renounced the ascendancy of the Holy Mother and accepted the sole dominion of Jesus Christ, as well as the power of the Vatican over their religious lives. He remembers receiving both First Communion and the cruciform that same evening. Maria's sacrament of the cross was scheduled for 10 p.m. She died suddenly at 8:45 p.m. By the rules of the Church and the laws of the Pax, someone who suffered brain death before receiving the cross could not be revived artificially to receive it. Instead of being furious or feeling betrayed by his new church, Federico's father took the tragedy as a sign that God, not the God he had grown up praying to, the gentle son infused with the universal female principles of the Holy Mother, but the fiercer New and Old Testament God of the universal church, had punished him, his family, and the entire Mariaist world of Llano Estacado. Upon the return to their homeworld with their child's body dressed in white for burial, the elder de Soya had become an unrelenting apostle for the Pax version of Catholicism. It came at a fertile time, as the ranching communities were being swept with the Red Death. Federico was sent to the Pax school in Ciudad del Madre at age 7, and his sisters were sent away to the convent in northern I was actually pronouncing it correctly for once and not having to think about it, and then I thought about it. Llano being spelled Llano. Because everything else is, here is Hispanic. I'm assuming I'm getting that correctly. Which is, Llano Estacado is, I guess, the plain of Estacado, if I remember what a llano is? Or is that a hill? It's been a while. My Spanish was never good. I never formally learned it in school. French, German, and Latin were mine. But I picked up a little. Let's see. Let's try it again. Where are you? It came at a fertile time, as the ranching communities were being swept with the Red Death. Federico was sent to the Pax school in Ciudad del Madre at age 7, and his sisters were sent away to the convent in northern Llano. Within his father's lifetime, indeed, before Federico was sent to New Madrid with Father Mayer to attend St. Thomas's seminary there, the surviving Mariaists on Madre de Dios had all converted to Pax Catholicism. Maria's terrible death had led to a world being born again. In his dreams, Father Captain de Soya explains little of this to the child walking with him through the nightmare-familiar streets of Da Vinci and Renaissance Vector. On Renaissance Vector. The girl, Aenea, seems to know all this. In his dreams, repeated almost every night for 142 nights before the girl's ship arrives, de Soya is explaining to the child how he has discovered the secret to curing the Red Death and saving his sister. The first morning that de Soya awakens, heart pounding and sheets soaked with sweat, he assumes that the secret to Maria's rescue is the cruciform, but the next night's dream proves him wrong. The secret, it seems, is the return of Maria's unicorn figure. All he has to do, he explains to his daughter, Aenea, is find the hospital through this maze of streets, and he knows that the return of the unicorn will save his sister. But he cannot find the hospital. The maze defeats him. Almost 5 months later, on the eve of the arrival of the ship from Parvati's system, in a variation on the same dream, de Soya does find the St. Jude Medical Center where his sister is sleeping, but he realizes with growing horror that he has now lost the figurine. In this dream, Aenea speaks for the first time. Drawing the small porcelain statuette from the pocket of her blouse, the child says, "You see, we've had it with us the entire time." Oh, you see, we've had it with us the entire time. The reality of de Soya's months in Renaissance system is literally and figuratively light years away from the Parvati experience. Unknown to de Soya, Gregorius, Key, and Rettig, each a mangled corpse in the heart of Raphael's resurrection creches, the ship is challenged within an hour of translating in system. 2 Pax Ram Scouts and a torch ship come alongside after exchanging transponder codes and data with Raphael's computer. It is decided to transfer the 4 bodies to a Pax Resurrection Center on Renaissance V. Unlike their solitary awakening in Parvati system, de Soya and his Swiss Guard troopers return to consciousness with the proper ceremony and care. Indeed, the resurrection is a difficult one for the Father Captain and Corporal Key, and the two are returned to their creche for an additional 3 days. Later, de Soya can only speculate whether the ship's automated resurrection facilities would have been up to the task. As it is, the 4 are reunited after a week in system, each man with his own chaplain counselor. Sergeant Gregorius finds this unnecessary. He is eager and impatient to return to duty, but de Soya and the other 2 welcome their extra days of rest and recuperation from death. The St. Anthony translates only hours after Raphael, and eventually de Soya is reunited with Captain Sati of the torch ship and Captain Lempriere of the troopship St. Thomas Aquila, which has returned to the Pax base in Renaissance system with more than 1,800 dead in cold storage, and 2,300 wounded men and women from the carnage in Hyperion system. The hospitals and cathedrals on Renaissance V and in orbital Pax bases begin the surgeries and resurrections at once. De Soya is present at her bedside when Commander Barnes-Oven regains life and consciousness. The small, red-haired woman seems another person, diminished to the point that it makes de Soya's heart ache with pity, with her head shaved, her skin red and slick with rebirth, and dressed only in a hospital gown. But her aggressiveness and demeanor have not been diminished. Almost at once she demands, "What the hell happened?" De Soya tells her about the Shrike carnage. He fills her in on the 7 months he has spent chasing the girl during the 4 months Barnes-Oven has spent in cold storage and transit from Hyperion. "You've really screwed the pooch, haven't you?" says the commander. De Soya smiles. So far, the ground force commander is the only one to speak honestly to him. He is all too aware that he has screwed the proverbial pooch. Twice he has been in charge of a major Pax operation with a single objective, take a child into custody, and twice he has failed miserably. De Soya expects, at the very least, to be relieved of duty, more likely to be court-martialed. To that end, when an Archangel courier arrives in system 2 months before the girl's arrival, Soya orders the couriers to return at once to Pachem to report his failure, and to return with instructions from Pax Command. In the meantime, Father Captain Soya concludes his courier message. In the meantime, Father Captain Soya concludes his courier message. He will continue arranging the details of preparation for the girl's capture in Renaissance system until he is relieved. The resources available to him this time are impressive. Besides more than 200,000 ground troops, including several thousand elite Pax Marines and the surviving Swiss Guard Brigades, plural, from Hyperion, Soya finds extensive sea and space naval forces. Present in Renaissance system and subject to his papal Disky command, there are 27 torch ships, 8 of them Omega class, as well as 108 nesting ram scouts to probe ahead of the torch ships. C-3 Fleet command and control ships with their escort cloud of 36 fast attack ALRs, the attack carrier Saint Malo with more than 200 space/air Scorpion fighters and 7,000 crew aboard, the antiquated cruiser Pride of Brescia, now renamed the Jacob, 2 additional troop transports in addition to the St. Thomas Acura, an even score of Benediction-class destroyers, 58 perimeter defense pickets, any 3 of which would be capable of defending an entire world, or a mobile task force, from attack, and more than 100 lesser ships, including in-system frigates that carried a lethal punch for close-in fighting, minesweepers, in-system couriers, drones, and the Raphael. And a partridge on a pear tree, in a pear tree, whatever. Three days after he has dispatched the second Archangel courier to Pachem and 7 weeks before Aenea's arrival, the Magi task force arrives. The Melchior, the Gaspar, and Father Captain Soya's old ship, the Balthazar. At first, Soya is excited to see his old companions, but then he realizes that they will be present during his humiliation. Nonetheless, he goes out in Raphael to greet them while they are still 6 AUs from Renaissance V, and the first thing Mother Commander Stone does upon his stepping into the Balthazar is to hand him his duffel of personal possessions that he had been forced to leave behind. On top of his neatly folded clothes, carefully wrapped in foam, is his sister Maria's gift of the porcelain unicorn. Soya is honest with Captain Hearn, Mother Captain Boulay, and Mother Commander Stone. He outlines the preparations he has made, but tells them that a new commander will almost certainly be arriving before the girl's ship arrives. 2 days later, he is proved a liar. The Archangel-class courier translates in system with 2 aboard, Captain Margaret Wu, aide to Fleet Admiral Marusin, and the Jesuit Father Brown, special advisor to Monsignor Lucas Audi, Undersecretary of Vatican State and confidant of Secretary of State Simone Augustino Cardinal Lordusami. If some of these names and titles are a bit aggressively long, they are. That's because they seem crazy. Wait, I just put that sentence in a blender. If these names seem aggressively long and crazy, it is because they are. Oh my lord, I didn't know I was that out of it. It's amazing how much you can do while on autopilot. I'm sorry. Anyway, they're high muckety-mucks. Captain Wu's sealed orders for Soya come with instructions to be opened even before her resurrection. He opens them immediately. The instructions are simple. He is to continue on his mission to capture the child. He will never be relieved of this duty, and Captain Wu, Father Brown, and any other dignitaries to arrive in system are there only to observe and to underline, if any underlining is necessary, Father Captain Soya's total authority over all Pax officials in the pursuit of this goal. This authority has been grudgingly accepted in the past weeks and months. There are 3 Pax Fleet Admirals and 11 Pax Ground Force Commanders in Renaissance system, and none are used to taking orders from a mere Father Captain. But the Papal Disky has been heard and obeyed. Now, in the final weeks, Soya reviews his plans and meets with commanders and civilian leaders of all levels, down to the mayors of Da Vinci and Benedetto, Toscanelli and Fioravante, Botticelli and Mosacchio. Oh, nice. We've got some people tuning in. Hey, hey to Frank Misers, and hello to you, CE39. I am having a good day. It's a day off. Sort of. I do have some things I have to get to later in the day, but for now, I'm enjoying my day. In the final weeks, with all plans made and forces assigned, Father Captain Soya actually finds time for personal reflection and activities. Alone now, away from the controlled chaos of staff meetings and tactical simulations, away even from Gregorius, Key, and Rettig, who accepted assignments as his personal bodyguards, Soya walks the streets of Da Vinci, visits the St. Jude Medical Center, and remembers his sister Maria. Somehow he discovers the nightly dreams are more compelling than seeing the real places. Soya has discovered that his old patron, Father Mayor, has been serving for many years as rector in the Ascension Benedictine Monastery in the city region of Florence, on the opposite side of Renaissance V from Da Vinci, and he flies there to spend a long afternoon talking to the old man. Father Mayor, now in his late 80s and looking forward to my first new life in Christ, is as optimistic, patient, and kind as Soya remembers from almost 3 decades ago. Oh, it's Mar. I'm sorry. Maher, which I've heard as Mayor, but also as Mar. Mar, it seems, has returned to Madre de Dios more recently than Soya. The Llano Estacado has been abandoned, says the old priest. The ranches are empty now. Ciudad del Madre has a few, I can't flip pages. Ciudad del Madre has a few dozen inhabitants, but only packs researchers, seeing if the world is truly worth terraforming. Yes, says Soya, my family emigrated back to Nuevo Madrid more than 20 standard years ago. My sisters serve the church. Loretta is a nun on Nevermore, Melinda is a priest on Nuevo Madrid. And your brother Esteban? Asks Father Mar with a warm smile. Soya takes a breath. Killed by the ousters in a space battle last year, he says. His ship was vaporized. No bodies were recovered. Father Mar blinks as if he has been slapped. I had not heard. No, says Soya, you wouldn't have. It was far away, beyond the old outback. Word has not officially reached even my family yet. I know only because my duties took me to the vicinity, and I met a returning captain who told me the news. Father Mar shakes his bald and mottled head. Esteban has found the only resurrection which our Lord promised, he says softly, tears in his eyes. Eternal resurrection in our Savior, Jesus Christ. Yes, says Soya. A moment later he says, Do you still drink scotch, Father Mar? The old man's rheumy eyes lift. Rheum. They're gooey. The old man's rheumy eyes lift to meet the other's gaze. Yes, but only for medicinal purposes, Father Captain Soya. Soya's dark brows rise a bit. I am still recovering from my last resurrection, Father Mar. The older priest nods seriously. And I am preparing for my first one, Father Captain Soya. I shall find the dusty bottle. On the following Sunday, Soya celebrates Mass at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, where he had accepted the cross so long ago. More than 800 of the faithful are in attendance, including Father Mar and Father Brown, the intelligent and insightful aide to Monsignor Audi. Sergeant I don't know why I'm struggling with that. Sergeant Gregorius, Corporal Key, and Lancer Rettig also attend, taking communion from Soya's hand. That night, Soya again dreams of Aenea. How is it that you are my daughter? He asks this night. I have always honored my vows of celibacy. The child smiles and takes his hand. 100 hours before the girl's ship is to translate, de Soya orders his fleet into position. The translation point is perilously close to the gravity well of Renaissance Vector, and many of the experts are concerned that the old ship will break up, either under the gravity torque of such an unadvisable close exit from C+, or from the horrendous deceleration needed if... I just started rereading the previous line. So I'm going to just take that from the top. The translation point is perilously close to the gravity well of Renaissance Vector, and many of the experts are concerned that the old ship will break up, either under the gravity torque of such an unadvisable close exit from C+, or from the horrendous deceleration needed if the ship is to land on the planet. Their concerns remain largely unspoken, as is their frustration at being kept in Renaissance system. Many of the fleet units had assignments along the frontier or deep in outer space. This waste of time has most of the officers on edge. It is largely because of this undercurrent of tension that Father Captain de Soya calls a meeting of all line officers 10 hours before the translation. Such conferences are usually handled over tight beam link-ups, but de Soya has the men and women physically transfer to the carrier Saint Malo. The huge ship's main briefing room is large enough to handle the scores of attending officers. De Soya begins by reviewing the scenarios they have practiced for weeks or months now. If the child once again threatens self-destruction, 3 torch ships, de Soya's old Magi task force, will close rapidly, wrap Class 10 fields around the ship, stun whoever is aboard into unconsciousness, and hold the ship in stasis until the Jacob can take it in tow with its massive field generators. If the ship tries to leave the system the way it ran from Parvati, ram scouts and fast attack fighters will harass it while the torch ships maneuver to disable it. De Soya pauses in the briefing. Questions? Among the familiar faces he can see in the row upon row of briefing chairs are Captains Lempriere, San, Wu, and Hearn, Father Brown, Mother Captain Boulay, Mother Commander Stone, and Commander Barnes-Oven. Sergeant Gregorius, Key, and Rettig stand at parade rest near the back of the briefing room, allowed in this august company only because of their status as personal bodyguards. Captain Margaret Wu says, "And if the ship attempts to land on Renaissance Vector, Renaissance Minor, or one of the moons?" De Soya steps away from the low podium. "As we discussed at our last meeting, should the ship attempt to land, we will make the judgment at the time." "Based on what factors, Father Captain?" asks Fleet Admiral Serra from the C-3 ship St. Thomas Aquinas. De Soya hesitates only a second. "Several factors, Admiral. Where the ship is headed, whether it would be safer, for the girl, to allow it to land or to attempt to disable it en route, whether there is any chance for the ship to escape." "Is there any chance?" asks Commander Barnes-Oven. The woman is hale and formidable again in her space-black uniform. "I will not say that there is no chance," says Father Captain de Soya, "not after Hyperion, but we will minimize any chance." "If the Shrike creature appears," begins Captain Lempriere. "We have rehearsed the scenario," says de Soya, "and I see no reason to vary from our plans. This time we will rely upon computerized fire control to a greater extent. On Hyperion, the creature remained in one spot for less than 2 seconds. This was too fast for human reactions and confused the programming in automated fire control systems. We have reprogrammed those systems, including individual troopers' suit fire control systems." "So the Marines will board the ship?" asks a Ram Scout captain in the last row. "Only if all else fails," says de Soya, "or after the girl and any companions have been locked in the stasis fields and stunned into unconsciousness." "And death wands will be used against the creature?" asks a destroyer captain. "Yes," says de Soya, "as long as doing so does not put the child in danger. Any other questions?" The room is silent. "Father Mar from Ascension Monastery will close with the blessing," says Father Captain de Soya. "Godspeed to you all." 27. I'm not sure what made us all go up to the consul's bedroom at the apex of the ship to watch the translation to normal space. His large bed, the one I had been sleeping in for the past couple of weeks, was in the center of the room, but it folded into a sort of couch. And I did that now. Behind his bed were two opaque cubes, the wardrobe cubby and the shower lavatory cube, but when the hull was allowed to go transparent, these cubes were just dark blocks against the starfield all around and overhead. As the ship spun down from hawking velocities, we asked that its hull be made transparent. Our first glimpse, before the ship started its rotation to line up for deceleration, was of the world of Renaissance Vector, close enough to be a blue and white disk rather than a starry speck, with two of its 3 moons visible. The Renaissance sun was brilliant to the left of the illuminated planets and moons. There were scores of stars visible, which was unusual, since the glare of the sun usually darkened the sky, so that only a few of the brightest stars could be seen. Aenea commented on this. "Those are not stars," said the ship as it completed its slow rotation. The fusion drive roared into existence as we began decelerating toward the planet. Normally, we never would have exited from C+ this close to a planet and moons. Their gravity wells made spin-down velocities very dangerous, but the ship had assured us that its augmented fields would handle any problems. But not this problem. "Those are not stars," repeated the ship. "There are more than 50 ships under drive within 100,000-kilometer radius of us. There are dozens more in orbital defense positions. 3 of those ships, torch ships from their fusion signature, are within 200 kilometers of us and are closing." None of us said a word. The ship had not had to tell us this final bit of information. The 3 fusion drive streaks seemed to be directly overhead, burning down at the top of our decelerating ship like blowtorch flames coming at our faces. "We are being hailed," said the ship. "Visual?" said Aenea. "Audio only." The ship's voice sounded more terse and businesslike than usual. Was it possible for an AI to feel tension? "Let's hear it." "The ship which has just entered Renaissance system," the voice was saying. It was a familiar voice. We had heard it in Parvati's system. Father Captain de Soya. "Attention! The ship which has just entered Renaissance system," he said again. Which ship is the call coming from?" asked Bettik as he watched the 3 torch ships close on us. His blue face was bathed in blue light from the plasma drives overhead. "Unknown," said the ship. "It is a tight beam transmission, and I have not located the source. It might be coming from any of the 79 ships I am currently tracking." I felt as if I should make some comment, say something intelligent. "Yoicks," I said. Aenea glanced at me and then looked back at the closing torch ship drives. "Time to Renaissance V?" she asked softly. 14 minutes at constant delta V, said the ship, but this level of deceleration would be illegal within 4 planetary distances. "Continue this level," Aenea said. "Attention, the ship which has just entered Renaissance system," the Soya voice was saying. "Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your being rendered unconscious. I repeat, attention, the ship which has just entered—" Aenea looked up at me and grinned. "I guess I can't use the depressurization ploy, huh, Raul?" I could not think of anything clever to say beyond my yoicks commentary. I lifted my hands, palms up. "Attention! The ship which has just entered the system. We are coming alongside. Do not resist as we merge external containment fields." For some reason, at that moment, as Aenea and Bettik raised their faces to watch the 3 fusion drives separate, as the torch ships actually became visible less than a kilometer away, one on each point of an equilateral triangle around us, I watched the girl's face. Her features were tense, perhaps, a slight tension at the corners of her mouth, but all in all, she seemed perfectly composed and raptly interested. Her dark eyes were large and luminous. "Attention, the ship," said the Pax captain's voice again. "We will be merging fields in 30 seconds. Aenea walked to the edge of the room, reaching out to touch the invisible hull. From my vantage point, it was as if we were standing on a circular summit of a very tall mountain, with stars and blue comet tails on every side, and Aenea was perched on the edge of the precipice.
Ship, please give me wide beam audio so that all the Pax ships can hear me.
Father Captain de Soya is watching the proceedings in the tactical reality as well as real space. In tactical, he stands above the plane of the ecliptic and sees his ships arrayed around the decelerating target ship like points of light set along the spokes and rim of a wheel. Near the hub, so close to the girl's ship as to be almost indistinguishable, are the Melchior, the Gaspar, and the Balthazar. Farther out, but decelerating in perfect synchronicity with the 4 ships at the hub, are more than a dozen other torch ships under the close command of Captain Sati on the St. Anthony. 10,000 clicks beyond them, set at a slowly rotating perimeter hub, also decelerating into cislunar Renaissance V space, are the Benediction-class destroyers, 3 of the 6 C-3 ships, and the attack carrier St. Malo, upon which de Soya watches the events from the ship's combat control center. He had, of course, wanted to be with the Magi task force, closing on the girl's ship, but he realized it would be inappropriate to be in such close command. It would have been especially galling to Mother Captain Stone, promoted only last week by Admiral Sarah, to have her first full command undermined in such a way. So de Soya watches from the St. Malo, his Archangel Raphael. Oh, there should be a comma there. So de Soya watches from the St. Malo, his Archangel Raphael in parking orbit around Renaissance V with the defense pickets and protective ALRs. Switching quickly from the crowded red-lit reality of St. Malo's CCC to the fusion flame view of tactical space, he sees the sparks above this rotating wheel of ships, the dozens of ships set in a giant sphere to stop this girl's ship from fleeing in any direction. Moving awareness back to the crowded CCC, he notes the blood-red faces of observers Wu and Brown, as well as Commander Barnes-Oven, who is in tight-beam contact with the 50 Marines aboard the Magi ships. In the corners of the crowded combat control center, de Soya can see Gregorius and his 2 troopers. All 3 of them had been bitterly disappointed not to be in the boarding parties, but de Soya was holding them back as personal bodyguards for the trip back to Pachem with the child. He keys the tight beam channel to the girl's ship again. "Attention, the ship," he says, feeling the pounding of his heart almost as background noise. "We will be merging fields in 30 seconds. He realizes that he is terrified for the girl's safety. If something is to go wrong, it will be in the next few minutes. Simulations have honed the process so that there is only a 6% projected chance of the girls being harmed, but 6% is too large for de Soya. He has dreamed of her every night for 142 nights. Suddenly, the common band rasps, and the girl's voice comes over the combat control center's speakers.
"Father Captain de Soya," she says.
There is no visual.
"Please do not attempt to merge fields or board this ship. Any attempt to do so will be disastrous."
De Soya glances at the readout. 15 seconds to fields merging. They have gone over this. No threats of suicide will prevent the boarding units, this time. Less than 100th of a second after the fields merge, all 3 of the Magi torch ships will spray the target ship with stun beams.
"Think, Father Captain," comes the girl's soft voice. "Our ship is controlled by a hegemony-era AI. If you stun us—"
"Stop fields merge!" snaps de Soya with less than 2 seconds until that is to happen automatically. Acknowledgement lights flick on from the Melchior, Gaspar, and Balthazar.
"You've been thinking silicon," continues the girl, "but our ship's AI core is completely organic, the old DNA type of processor banks. If you stun us into unconsciousness, you stun it."
"Damn, damn, damn!"
Oh. "Damn, damn, damn!"
de Soya hears. At first he thinks it is himself whispering, but he turns to see Captain Wu cursing under her breath.
"We are decelerating at 87 gravities. continues Aenea. If you knock our AI out, well, it controls all internal fields, the drives.
Soya switches to the engineering bands on the St. Malo and the Magi ships. Is this true? Will this knock out their AI? There is an unbearable pause of at least 10 seconds. Finally, Captain Hearn, whose academy degree had been in engineering, comes on the tight beam. We don't know, Federico. Most of the details of true AI biotechnology have been lost or suppressed by the Church. It is a mortal sin to... Yes, snaps Soya. But is she telling the truth? Somebody here has to know. Will a DNA-based AI be at risk if we spray the ship with stunners? Bramley, the chief engineer of the St. Malo, keys in. Sir, I would think that the designers would have protected the brain from such a possibility. Do you know? Demands Soya. No, sir, says Bramley after a moment. But that AI is totally organic? Persists Soya. Yes, comes Captain Hearn's voice on tight beam. Except for the electronic and bubble memory interfaces, a ship's AI of that era would have been cross-helix structured DNA held in suspension with... All right, says Soya on multiple tight beam to all ships. Hold your positions. Do not, repeat, do not let the girl's ship change course or attempt spin-up to C+. If it attempts this, merge and stun. Acknowledgement lights flicker from Magi and the outer ships. So please don't create this disaster, comes the end of Aenea's broadcast. We are only trying to land on Renaissance Vector. Father Captain Soya opens his tight beam to her ship. Aenea, he says, his voice gentle, let us board and we'll take you to the planet. I guess I'd rather land there myself, says the girl. Soya thinks that he can hear a hint of amusement in her voice. Renaissance Vector is a big world, says Soya, watching the tactical readout as he speaks. They are 10 minutes from entering atmosphere. Where do you want to land? Silence for a full minute. Then Aenea's voice. The Leonardo spaceport in Da Vinci would be all right. That spaceport has been closed for more than 200 years, says Soya. Aren't your ship's memory banks more recent than that? Only silence on the comm channels. There is a Pax Mercantilis spaceport on the western quadrant of Da Vinci, he says. Will that do? Yes, says Aenea. You will have to change direction, enter orbit, and land under space traffic control, tight beams Soya. I will download the Delta V changes now. No, says the girl. My ship will land us. Soya sighs and looks at Captain Wu and Father Brown. Commander Barnes-Oven says, My Marines can board within 2 minutes. Our ship will be entering atmosphere in 7 minutes, says Soya. At her velocity, even the slightest miscalculation will be fatal. He keys the tight beam. Aenea, there is too much space and aircraft traffic over Da Vinci for you to try a landing like this. Please instruct your ship to obey the orbital insertion parameters I've just transmitted and... I'm sorry, Father Captain, says the girl, but we are going to land now. If you want the spaceport traffic control to send up approach data, that would help. If I talk to you again, it'll be when we're all on the ground. This is... me out. Damn, says Soya. He keys Pax Mercantilis traffic control. Pax Mercantilis? Pax Mercantilis? I'm going to figure that one out. I really need to. Did you copy that, Control? Sending approach data now, comes the controller's voice. Hearn, Stone, Boulay, snaps Soya. You copy? Acknowledged, says Mother Captain Stone. We're going to have to break off in 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Soya flicks into tactical long enough to see the hub and wheel breaking up as the torch ships initiate their Delta Vs to achieve braking orbits. The ships were never designed for atmosphere. The St. Malo has been in orbit around the planet and now lies almost in the path of the girl's ship as it brakes wildly before entering atmosphere. Prepare my dropship, commands Soya. CAP? He says over the planetary comm channel. Yes, sir, comes Flight Commander Klaus's acknowledgement. She and 46 other Scorpions are waiting in combat air patrol high above Da Vinci. "Are you tracking?" "Good pilot, sir," says Klaus. "I remind you that no shots will be fired except under my direct command, Flight Commander." "Yes, sir." "The St. Malo will be launching 17 fighters, which will follow the target ship down," says De Soya. "My dropship will make the number 18. Our transponders will be set to 059. "Affirmative," says Klaus. "Beacons to 059. Target ship and 18 friendlies." "De Soya out," he says, and unplugs his umbilicals to the combat control center panels. Tactical space disappears. Captain Wu, Father Brown, Commander Barnes-Oven, Sergeant Gregorius, Key, and Rettig follow him to the dropship. The dropship pilot, a lieutenant named Karen Norris Cook, is waiting with all systems ready. It takes less than a minute for them to buckle in and launch from the St. Malo's flight tube. They have rehearsed this many times. De Soya is getting tactical feed through the dropship net as they enter the atmosphere. "The girl's ship has wings," says the pilot, using the ancient phrase. For millennia, feet dry has meant an aircraft crossing over land, feet wet signifies crossing over water, and has wings means translation from space to atmospheric travel. A visual of the ship shows that this is not literally true. While data on the old ship suggests that it has some morphing capability, it has not actually grown wings in this case. Cameras from the defense pickets clearly show the girl's ship entering the atmosphere stern first, balancing on a tail of fusion flame. Captain Wu leans close to De Soya. "Cardinal Lord Dusamy said that this child is a threat to the Pax," she whispers so that others cannot hear. Father Captain De Soya nods tersely. "What if he meant that she could be a threat to millions of people on Renaissance V?" Wu whispers, "That fusion drive alone is a terrible weapon. A thermonuclear explosion above the city." De Soya feels his insides clamping with the chill of those words, but he has thought this out. "No," he whispers back. "If she turns the fusion trail on anything, we stun the ship, shoot out its engines, and let it fall." "The girl," begins Captain Wu. "We can only hope she'll survive the crash," says De Soya. "We won't let thousands, or millions, of Pax citizens die." He leans back in his acceleration couch and keys the spaceport, knowing that the tight beam has to punch through the layer of ionization around the screeching dropship. Glancing at the external video, he sees that they are crossing the Terminator. It will be dark at the spaceport. "Spaceport Control," acknowledges the Pax traffic director. "The target ship is decelerating on our directed flight path. Delta V is high. Illegal, but acceptable. All aircraft traffic till cleared for a 1,000-kilometer radius. Time to landing, 4 minutes, 35 seconds. "Spaceport secured," chimes Commander Barnes-Oven on the same net. De Soya knows there are several thousand Pax troops in and around the spaceport. Once the girl's ship is down, it will never be allowed to take off again. He looks at the live video. The lights of Da Vinci gleam from horizon to horizon. The girl's ship has its navigation lights on, red and green beacons flashing. The powerful landing lights flick on and stab downward through cloud. "On path," comes the traffic controller's calm voice. "Deceleration nominal." "We have visual," cries Cap Commander Klaus over the net. "Keep your distance," tight beams De Soya. The Scorpions can sting from several hundred clicks out. He does not want them crowding the descending ship. "Affirmative." "On path, ILS reports nominal descent, 3 minutes to touchdown." "Oh. On path, ILS reports nominal descent, 3 minutes to touchdown." The controller calls up to the girl's ship. "Unidentified ship, you are cleared to land." Silence from Aenea. De Soya blinks in tactical. The girl's ship is a red ember now, almost hovering 10,000 meters above the Pax spaceport. De Soya's dropship and the fighters are a click higher, circling like angry insects. "Or vultures," thinks the father captain. The Llano Estacado had vultures, although why the seed ship colonists had imported them no one knew. The staked planes, the stakes being the atmosphere generators set in a grid every 30 clicks, had been dry and windy enough to reduce any corpse to a mummy within hours. De Soya shakes his head to clear it. 1 minute to landing, reports the controller. Unidentified ship, you are approaching 0 descent rate. Please modify Delta V to continue descent along designated flight path. Unidentified ship, please acknowledge. Damn, whispers Captain Wu. Sirs, says pilot Karen Cook, the ship has stopped descending. It is hanging there about 2,000 meters above the spaceport. We see it, Lieutenant, says De Soya. The ship's red and green lights are flashing. The landing lights on the rear fins are bright enough to illuminate the spaceport tarmac more than 1.5 miles below them. Other spacecraft at the port are dark. Most have been pulled into hangars or onto secondary taxiways. The circling aircraft, including his own dropship, show no lights. On the multiple tight beam, he says, "All ships and aircraft, keep your distance. Hold your fire." Unidentified ship, says the PAX controller, you are drifting off path. Please resume nominal descent rate at once. Unidentified ship, you are leaving controlled airspace. Please resume controlled descent at once. Shite, whispers Barnes-Aven. Her troopers wait in concentric circles around the spaceport, but the girl's ship is no longer above the spaceport, drifts over the center of Da Vinci. The ship's landing lights wink off. The ship's fusion drive shows no signs of coming on. The ship's fusion drive shows no signs of coming on, De Soya says to Captain Wu. Note that it's on repulsors alone. Wu nods, but is obviously not satisfied. A fusion drive ship hovering above an urban center is like a guillotine blade over an exposed neck. Remember my comment about the Xinti lesson last time. It's the same thing. Same situation here, but with civilian casualty possibilities. CAP, calls De Soya. I'm moving within 500 meters. Please close with me. He nods to the pilot, who brings the dropship down and around in a predatory swoop. In their rear couches, Gregorius and the other 2 troopers sit stiffly in full combat armor. What the hell is she up to? Whispers Commander Barnes-Aven. On his tactical band, De Soya can see that the commander has authorized 100 or so troopers to rise on reaction packs to follow the drifting ship. The external cameras on the troopers are invisible. De Soya remembers the small aircraft or flying pack that had plucked the girl from the Valley of the Time Tombs. He keys ground control in the orbital pickets. Sensors, are you watching for small objects leaving the target ship? The acknowledgement is from the primary picket ship. Yes, sir. Don't worry, sir. Nothing bigger than a microbe's gonna get out of that ship without us tracking it, sir. Very good, says De Soya. What have I forgotten? Aenea's ship continues floating slowly over Da Vinci, heading north-northwest at about 25 clicks per hour, a slow, vertical dirigible drifting on the wind. Above the ship swirl the fighters that have entered atmosphere with De Soya's dropship. Around the ship, like the rotating walls of a hurricane around the eye, are the CAP Scorpions. Beneath, flitting just above city buildings and bridges, tracking proceedings on their own suit visor, infrared sensors, and tracking feeds, fly the spaceport Marines and troopers. The girl's ship floats on silent EM repulsors over the skyscrapers and industrial areas of Da Vinci on Renaissance Vector. The city is ablaze with highway lights, building lights, the green swaths of playing fields, and the brightly lit rectangles of parking areas. Tens of thousands of ground cars creep along ribbons of elevated highways, their headlights adding to the city light show. It's rotating, sirs, reports the pilot. Still on repulsors. On video, as well as tactical, De Soya can see Aenea's ship slowly turning from the vertical to the horizontal. No wings appear. This attitude would be strange for the passengers, but makes no practical difference. The internal fields must still be controlling up and down. The ship, looking more than ever like a silver dirigible drifting with the soft breezes, floats over the river and rail yards of northwest Da Vinci. Traffic control demands a response, but the comm channels remain silent. What have I forgotten? wonders Father Captain de Soya. When Aenea asked the ship to rotate to the horizontal, I admit that I almost lost my composure for a moment. The sense of losing one's balance was all but overwhelming. All three of us had been standing near the edge of the circular room, looking down through the clear hull as if peering over a cliff's edge. Now we tipped over through the clear... This keeps happening. I don't know if it's because the book is slightly larger than usual. I don't know. Now we tipped over toward those lights 1,000 meters below. Bettik and I took several involuntary steps back toward the center of the room. I actually flailed my arms to keep my balance, but Aenea remained at the edge of the room, watching the ground tip up and become a wall of city buildings and lights. I almost sat down on the couch, but I managed to remain standing and control my vertigo by seeing the ground as a giant wall we were flying past. Streets and the rectangular grid of city blocks moved past as we drifted forward. I turned in a complete circle, seeing the few brightest stars through the city glare behind me. The clouds reflected back the orange lights of the city. "What are we looking for now?" I asked. At intervals, the ship reported the presence of the circling aircraft and the number of sensors probing us. We had ordered the ship to shut off the insistent demands of spaceport traffic control. Aenea had wanted to see the river, but now we were over the river. It was a dark serpentine ribbon through the city lights. We drifted over it toward the northwest. Occasionally, a barge or pleasure boat passed underneath, although from this perspective the lights seemed to crawl up or down the wall of the city we were drifting by. Instead of answering me directly, Aenea said, "Ship, you're sure that this used to be part of the Tethys?" "According to my charts," said the ship. "Of course, my memory is not—" "There!" cried Bettik, pointing directly ahead down the line of dark river. I could see nothing, but evidently Aenea did. "Get us lower," she ordered the ship. "Quickly!" "The safety margins have already been violated," said the ship. "If we drop below this altitude, we may—" "Do it!" shouted the girl. "Override! Code Prelude C#! Do it!" The ship lurched down and forward. "Head for that arch," said Aenea, pointing directly overhead along the wall of city and river. "Arch?" I said. Then I saw it, a black cord, an arc of darkness against the city lights. Bettik looked at the girl. I had half expected it to be gone, torn down. Aenea showed her teeth. "They can't tear it down. It would take atomic explosives, and even those might not work. The Technocore directed the construction of those things. They're built to last." The ship was hurtling forward now on repulsors. I could clearly see the arch of the Farcaster portal like a giant hoop over the river. An industrial park had grown up around the ancient artifact, and the rail yards and storage yards were empty except for cracked concrete, weeds, rusting wire, and the hulks of abandoned machines. The portal was still a kilometer away. I could see the lights of the city through it. No, now it seemed to shimmer a bit, as if a curtain of water were falling from the metal arch. "We're going to make it," I said. No sooner were the words out than a violent explosion rattled the ship and we began plunging toward the river. "The old Farcaster portal!" cries de Soya. He had seen the arch a minute earlier but had thought it another bridge. Now it sinks in. "They're headed for the Farcaster portal. This used to be a part of the River Tethys." He brings up tactical. Sure enough, the girl's ship is accelerating toward the arch. "Relax," says Commander Barnesoven. "The portals are dead. They haven't worked since the fall. It can't—" "Get us closer!" de Soya shouts at the pilot. The dropship accelerates, throwing them all deep into their couch cushions. There is no internal containment field in a dropship. "Get us close! Close the gap!" de Soya shouts at the lieutenant. On the wideband command channels, he says, "All aircraft close on the target." "They're going to beat us to it," says Pilot Cook through the 3G force, pressing her back into the command chair. "CAP leader," calls de Soya, his voice strained by the high load. "Fire at the target! Fire to disable engines and repulsors! Now!" Energy beams lance through the night. The girl's ship seems to stumble in midair like a gut-shot beast, and then falls into the river several hundred meters short of the Farcaster portal. An explosion of steam mushrooms up into the night. The dropship banks around the pillar of steam at an altitude of 1,000 meters. The air is filled with circling aircraft and flying troopers. The comm channels are suddenly alive with excited chatter. "Shut up!" orders de Soya over the widebands. "CAP leader, can you see the ship?" "Negative," comes Klaus's voice. "Too much steam and debris from the explosion." "Was there an explosion?" demands de Soya. Then, on tight beam to the defense pickets 1,000 clicks above, "Radar, sensors?" "The target ship is down," comes the reply. "I know that, you idiot," says de Soya. "Can you scan it under the river surface?" "Negative," answers the picket. "Too much airborne and ground clutter. Deep radar can't discriminate between—" "Damn!" says de Soya. "Mother Captain Stone?" "Yes," comes his former exec's voice from her torch ship in orbit. "Slag it," orders de Soya. "The portal, the river beneath it. Slag it for a full minute. Slag it until it melts. Wait, slag it in 30 seconds. He switches to airborne tactical bands. "Enemy aircraft and troopers in the vicinity. You have 30 seconds before a CPB lances this entire area. Scatter!" Pilot Cook takes the advice and banks the dropship sharply, accelerating back toward the spaceport at Mach 1.5. "Whoa, whoa!" shouts de Soya through the G-load. "Just a click out. I need to watch." Both visual and tactical are a visual demonstration of chaos theory as hundreds of aircraft and airborne troopers fly away from the portal as if flung outward by an explosion. The area is barely empty on radar before the violet beam burns down from space. 10 meters wide and too bright to look at directly, the CPB strikes the ancient Farcaster portal perfectly on target. Concrete, steel, and ferroplast melt into lakes and rivers of lava on either bank of the real river. The river itself turns to steam in an instant, sending the shockwave and steam cloud billowing out over the city for kilometers in every direction. This time the mushroom cloud reaches toward the stratosphere. Captain Wu, Father Brown, and all the others are staring at Father Captain de Soya. They can almost hear their thoughts. He can almost hear their thoughts. The girl was to be captured alive. He ignores their stares and says to the pilot, "I'm not familiar with this model of dropship. Can it hover?" "For a few minutes," responds the pilot. Her face is slick with sweat under her helmet. "Get us down there and hover over the portal arch," commands de Soya. 50 meters would be fine. "Sir," says the pilot, "the thermals and the shock waves from the steam explosions—" "Do it, Lieutenant." "Do it, Lieutenant." The Father Captain's voice is level, but there will be no arguing with it. They hover. Steam and a violent drizzle fill the air, but their searchlight beams and high-profile radar stab downward. The Farcaster arch is glowing white-hot, but it still stands. "Amazing," whispers Commander Barnes-Oven. Mother Captain Stone comes over tactical. "Father Captain, the target was hit, but it's still there. Do you want me to lance it again?" "No," says de Soya. Beneath the arch, the river has cauterized itself, water flowing back into the superheated scar. New steam billows upward as the riverbanks of melted steel and concrete flow into water. The hissing is audible through the external pickups. The river is wild with eddies and whirlpools. It is filled with swirling debris. De Soya looks up from tactical and his monitors and sees the others looking at him again. The orders were to take the child alive and return her to Pachem. "Commander Barnes-Oven," he says formally, "would you please order your troopers to land and begin an immediate search of the river and adjoining areas?" "Certainly," says Barnes-Oven, keying her command net and issuing orders. Her gaze never leaves Father Captain de Soya's face. 28. In the days that follow the dragging of the river and the discovery of no spaceship, no bodies... I had that right. In the days that follow the dragging of the river and the discovery of no spaceship, no bodies, and only a hint of debris of what may have been the girl's ship, Father Captain de Soya fully expects a court-martial and perhaps an excommunication. The Archangel Courier is dispatched to Pachem with the news, and within 20 hours the same ship, with different human couriers, returns with the verdict. There will be a board of review. De Soya nods when he hears the news, believing it to be a precursor to his return to Pachem for court-martial and worse. Surprisingly, it is the pleasant Father Brown who heads the Board of Review, as personal representative of Secretary of State Simone Agostino Cardinal Lordusame, with Captain Wu standing in for Admiral Marusin of Pax Fleet. Other members of the board include 2 of the admirals present during the debacle and Commander Barnes-Oven. De Soya is offered counsel, but he refuses. The Father Captain is not under arrest during the 5 days of the board hearing, not even under house arrest, but it is understood that he will remain on Pax military base outside of Da Vinci until the hearing is concluded. During those 5 days, Father Captain de Soya walks along the river path within the base confines, watches news on local television and direct access channels, and occasionally looks skyward, imagining that he can guess where Raphael still swings in parking orbit, uncrewed and silent except for its automated systems. De Soya hopes that the ship's next captain brings it more honor. Many of his friends visit him. Gregorius, Key, and Rettig are nominally still his bodyguards, although they no longer carry weapons, and, like de Soya, remain on the Pax base in virtual arrest. Mother Captain Boulay, Captain Hearn, and Mother Captain Stone all stop by after giving their testimony and before shipping out for the frontier. That evening, de Soya watches the blue tails of their dropships rising toward the night sky and envies them. Captain Sati of the St. Anthony has a glass of wine with de Soya before returning to his torchship and active duty in another system. Even Captain Lempriere comes by after testifying, and it is that bald man's halting sympathy that finally angers de Soya. On the 5th day, de Soya goes before the board. The situation is odd. De Soya still holds the papal disci and thus is technically beyond reproach or indictment, but it is understood that Pope Julius through Cardinal Lordusame has willed this board of review, and de Soya, shaped to obedience through both his military and Benedictine training, comply... I missed the emphasis. My bad. On the 5th day, de Soya goes before the board. The situation is odd. De Soya still holds the papal disci, and thus is technically beyond reproach or indictment. But it is understood that Pope Julius, through Cardinal Lordusame, has willed this board of review, and de Soya, shaped to obedience through both his military and Benedictine training, complies with humility. He does not expect exoneration. In the tradition of ship captains since the Middle Ages on Old Earth, de Soya knows well that the coin of a captain's prerogatives has 2 sides, almost godlike power over everyone and everything aboard one's ship, balanced by the requirement to take total responsibility for any damage to the ship or failure of one's mission. De Soya has not damaged his ship, neither his former task force nor his new ship, the Raphael, but he is acutely aware that his failure has been total. With immense resources of the Pax available to him both on Hyperion and in Renaissance space, he has failed to capture an 11-year-old child. He can see no excuse for this, and so he testifies during his part of the hearing.
"And why did you order the lancing of the Farcaster portal on Renaissance Vector?"
asks Father Admiral Coombs after de Soya's statement. De Soya raises a hand, then drops it. "I realized at that moment that the reason for the girl's trip to this world was to reach the portal," he says. "Our only hope for detaining her was to destroy the portal arch."
"But it was not destroyed?" queries Father Brown.
"No," says de Soya.
"In your experience, Father Captain de Soya," says Captain Wu, "has there been any target that 1 minute of fully applied CPB fire would not destroy?"
De Soya thinks for a moment. There are targets such as orbital forest or ouster swarm asteroids that would not be fully destroyed by even a full minute of lance fire, he says, but they would have been severely damaged.
And the Farcaster portal was not damaged,
persists Father Brown. Not to my knowledge, says de Soya. Captain Wu turns to the other board members.
We have an affidavit from Chief of Planetary Engineers Rexton Ham that the alloy of the Farcaster portal, although radiating heat for more than 48 hours, was not damaged by the attack.
The panel members converse among themselves for several minutes.
Father Captain de Soya, begins Admiral Sarah when the questioning resumes, were you aware that your attempt to destroy the portal might have destroyed the girl's ship?
Yes, Admiral.
And in so doing, continues Sarah, killed the child?
Yes, Admiral.
And your orders were, specifically, to bring the child to Pachem unharmed. Am I correct?
Yes, Admiral. Those were my precise orders.
But you were willing to defy those orders?
De Soya takes a breath. In this case, Admiral, I felt it was a calculated risk. My instructions were that it was of paramount importance to bring the child to Pachem within the shortest time possible. In those few seconds when I realized that she might be able to travel by Farcaster portal and escape apprehension, I felt that destroying the portal, not the child's ship, was our best hope. To be honest, I felt that the ship had either already traversed the portal or had not yet reached it. All indications were that the ship had been struck and fallen into the river. I did not know whether the ship had the capacity to travel underwater through the portal, or, for that matter, whether the portal could forecast an object underwater.
Captain Wu folds her hands. And to your knowledge, Father Captain, has the Farcaster portal shown any signs of activity since that night?
Not to my knowledge, Captain.
To your knowledge, Father Captain, she continues, had any Farcaster portal, on any world of the former web or any spaceborne portal, for that matter, had any Farcaster shown any sign of renewed activity since the fall of the Farcasters more than 270 standard years ago?
To my knowledge, says de Soya, they have not. Father Brown leans forward.
Then, Father Captain, perhaps you can tell this board why you thought that the girl had the capacity to open one of these portals and was attempting to escape through this particular one.
De Soya does not open his hands this time. Father, I don't know. I guess that I had the distinct feeling that she was not willing to be captured, and her flight along the river... I don't know, Father. The use of the portal is the only thing that made sense that night.
Captain Wu looks at her fellow panelists. Any more questions?
After a silence, the captain says,
That will be all, Father Captain de Soya. This board will apprise you of its findings by tomorrow morning.
De Soya nods and leaves. One sec. Sorry about that. Pro tip. Human lungs are not meant to have water in them. Much better. Sorry. That night, walking the base path along the river, de Soya tries to imagine what he will do if he is court-martialed, and stripped of his priesthood but not imprisoned. The thought of freedom after such failure is more painful than the thought of prison. Excommunication has not been mentioned by the board, no punishment has, but de Soya clearly sees his conviction, his return to Pachem for higher court proceedings, and his ultimate banishment from the church. Only a terrible failure or heresy could bring about such punishment, but de Soya sees, unblinkingly, what a terrible failure his efforts have been.
Father Captain de Soya, begins Captain Wu, speaking for the others, this board of review was convened to answer queries from Pax Command and the Vatican as to the disposition and outcome of recent events. Specifically, in this command and this commander's failure to apprehend the child known as Aenea. After 5 days of deliberation and after many hundreds of hours of testimony and depositions, it is the finding of this board that all possible efforts and preparations were made to carry out this mission. The fact that the child known as Aenea, or someone or something traveling with her, was able to escape via a Farcaster that has not worked for almost 3 standard centuries could not have been anticipated by you or by any other officer working with you or under your command. The fact that the Farcasters could resume operation at all is, of course, of grave concern to the Pax Command and to the Church. The implications of this will be explored by the highest echelons of Pax Command and the Vatican hierarchy. As for your role in this, Father Captain de Soya, with the exception of possible concern we have for your risking the life of the child, you are charged with...
that does not have a comma.
As for your role in this, Father Captain de Soya, with the exception of possible concern we have for your risking the life of the child you are charged with taking into custody, we find your actions responsible, correct, in keeping with your mission priorities, and legal. This board, while official only in the capacity of review, recommends that you continue your mission with the Archangel-class ship designated as the Raphael, that your use of the Papal Authority Disk Key continue, and that you requisition those materials and personnel you consider necessary for the continuance of this mission.
De Soya, still at rigid attention, blinks rapidly several times before saying, "Captain?"
"Yes, Father Captain,"
says Wu. "Does this mean that I can keep Sergeant Gregorius and his troopers as my personal guard?" Captain Wu, whose authority strangely overwhelms that of the admirals and planetary ground commanders at the table, smiles.
"Father Captain," she says, "you could order the members of this board to go along as your personal guard if you wish. The authority of your papal disk key remains absolute."
De Soya does not smile. "Thank you, Captain. Sirs, Sergeant Gregorius and his 2 men will suffice. I will leave this morning."
"Leave for where, Federico?" asks Father Brown. "As you know, exhaustive searches of the records have not given us a clue as to where the Farcaster might have sent that ship. The River Tethys has changeable connections, and any data about the next world on the line has evidently been lost to us."
"Yes, Father," says de Soya, "but there are only 200-some worlds that used to be connected by that Farcaster River. The girl's ship has to be on one of them. My Archangel ship can reach all of them, given time for resurrection after translation, in less than 2 years. I will begin immediately." At this, the men and women at the table can only stare. The man in front of them is facing several hundred deaths and difficult resurrections. As far as they know, no one since the beginning of the sacrament of resurrection has ever submitted to such a cycle of pain and rebirth. Father Brown stands and lifts his hands in benediction.
"In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti," he intones. "Go with God, Father Captain de Soya. Our prayers go with you."
"29. When they shot us down several hundred meters short of the Farcaster portal, I was sure we were dead this time. The internal containment field failed the second the generators were struck. The wall of the planet we were looking up at suddenly and inarguably became down, and the ship fell like an elevator with its cables cut. The sensations that followed are hard for me to describe. I know now that the internal field switched to what was known as a crash field. No misnomer, I can assure you. And for the next few minutes it felt precisely as if we were caught up in a giant vat of gelatin. In a sense, we were. The crash field expanded in a nanosecond to fill every square millimeter of the ship, cushioning us and keeping us absolutely immobile as the spacecraft plunged into the river, bounced off the bottom mud, fired its fusion engine, creating a giant plume of steam, and plowed ahead relentlessly through the mud, steam, water, and debris from the imploding riverbanks until the ship fulfilled the last command given to it: pass through the Farcaster portal. The fact that we did so 3 meters beneath the broiling river's surface did not keep the portal from working. The ship later told us that while its stern was passing through the Farcaster, the water above it and behind it suddenly became superheated steam, as if one of the Pax ships or aircraft were lancing it with a CPB. Ironically, it was the steam that deflected the beam for the milliseconds necessary for the ship to complete its transition. Meanwhile, knowing none of these details, I stared. My eyes were open. I could not close them against the cloying force of the crash field, and I was watching the external video monitors set along the foot of the bed as well as looking out through the still transparent hull apex as the Farcaster portal flickered to life amid the steam and sunlight poured over the river's surface, until suddenly we were through the steam cloud and once again smashing against rock and river bottom, then hitting a beach beneath blue sky and sun. Wait, was he able to move his eyes? If you can't blink, I would imagine eye movement would be tough too. Anyway, his eyes are not perfectly spherical, among other things. Sorry. Then the monitors went off and the hull went dull. For several minutes we were trapped in this cave blackness. I was floating in midair, or would have been had it not been for the gelatinous crash field. My arms were thrown wide, my right leg was half bent in a running posture behind me, my mouth was open in a silent scream, and I could not blink. At first, the fear of suffocation was very strong. The crash field was in my open mouth, but I soon realized that my nose and throat were receiving oxygen. The crash field, it turns out, worked much like the expensive osmosis masks used for deep-sea diving during the hegemony days. Air leached through the field mass, pressing against one's face and throat. It was not a pleasant experience. I've always detested the thought of choking, but my anxiety was manageable. More disturbing was the blackness and claustrophobic sense of being caught in a giant, sticky web. During those long minutes in the darkness, I had thoughts of the ship being stuck there forever, disabled, with no way to relax the crash fields, and the 3 of us starving to death in our undignified postures, until someday the ship's energy banks would be depleted, the crash field would collapse, and our whitened skeletons would drop and rattle around the interior hull of the ship like so many bones being cast by an invisible fortune-teller. As it was, the field slowly folded away less than 5 minutes later. The lights came on, flickered, and were replaced with red emergency lighting even as we were gently lowered to what had been the wall a short while before. The outer hull became transparent once again, but very little light filtered in through the mud and debris. I had not been able to see Bettik and Aenea while stuck in place. They had been just out of my frozen field of sight, but now I saw them as the field lowered them to the hull with me. I was amazed to hear a scream issue from my throat and realized that it was the shout that had welled up in me the instant of the crash. For a moment, the 3 of us just sat on a curved hull wall, rubbing and testing our own arms, legs, and head to make sure we weren't injured. Then Aenea spoke for us all.
"Holy shit,"
she said, and stood up on the curving floor of the hull. Her legs were shaky. "Ship," called the android. "Yes, Bettik." The voice was as calm as always. "Are you damaged?" "Yes, Bettik," said the ship. "I have just completed a full damage assessment. Field coils, repulsors, and Hawking translators have suffered extensive damage, as have sections of the aft hull and 2 of the 4 landing fins." "Ship," I said, struggling to my feet and looking out through the transparent nose of the hull. There was sunlight coming through the curved wall above us, but most of the exterior hull was opaque with mud, sand, and other debris. The dark river came 2/3 of the way up the sides and was sloshing against us. It looked as if we had run aground on a sandy bank, but not before plowing through many meters of river bottom. "Ship," I tried again, "are your sensors working?" "Only radar and visual," it replied. "Is there any pursuit?" I said. "Did any Pax ships come through the Farcaster with us?" "Negative," said the ship. "There are no inorganic ground or air targets within my radar range." Aenea walked to the vertical wall that had been the carpeted floor. "No troopers even?" she asked. "No," said the ship. "Is the Farcaster still operational?" asked Bettik. "Negative," said the ship. "The portal ceased functioning 18 nanoseconds after we transited it." I relaxed a bit, then, and looked at the girl, trying to make sure just by staring that she hadn't been injured. Except for wildly disarrayed hair and the excitement in her eyes, she looked normal enough. She grinned at me. "So how do we get out of here, Raul?" I looked up and saw what she meant. The central stairwell was about 3 meters above our heads. "Ship," I said, "can you turn the internal fields back on long enough for us to get out of the ship?" "I'm sorry," said the ship. "The fields are down and will not be repaired for some time." "Can you morph an opening in the hull above us?" I said. The feeling of claustrophobia was coming back. "I'm afraid not," said the ship. "I am functioning on battery power at the moment, and morphing would demand far more energy than I have available. The main airlock is functional. If you can get to that, I will open it." The 3 of us exchanged glances. "Great," I said at last. "We get to crawl 30 meters back through the ship while everything's cattywampus." Aenea was still looking up at the stairwell opening.
"The gravity's different here. Feel it?"
I realized that I did. There was a lightness to everything. I must have been noticing it, but putting it down to a variation in the internal field. But there was no more internal field. This was a different world, with different gravity. I found myself grinning back at the child. "So are you saying we can fly up there?" I said, pointing to the bed hanging on the wall above us and the stairwell next to it.
"No," said Aenea, "but the gravity here seems a little less than Hyperion's. You two boost me up there, and I'll drop something down to you, and we'll crawl back to the airlock."
And that is precisely what we did. We made a stirrup with our hands and boosted Aenea to the bottom lip of the stairwell opening, where she balanced, reached out and plucked the loosely hanging blanket from the bed, tied it around the balustrade, and dropped the other end down to us, and then, after Bettik and I pulled our way up, all 3 of us walked precariously on the central drop-shaft post, hanging on to the circular stairs to the side and above to keep our balance, and gradually made our way through the red-lit mass of a ship. Through the library, where books and cushions had fallen to the lower hull despite the cord restraints on the shelves. I just lost my place. It is a long sentence. Where did I? Through the library where books and cushions had fallen to the lower hull despite the cord restraints on the shelves, through the hollow pit area where the Steinway was still in place because of its restraining locks, but where our loose personal belongings had tumbled to the bottom of the ship. Here we made a stop while I lowered myself to the cluttered hull bottom and retrieved the pack and weapons I had left on the couch. Strapping the pistol on my belt, tossing up the rope I had stored in the pack, I felt more prepared for the next eventuality than I had a moment before. When we got to the corridor, we could see that whatever had damaged the drive area below had also played havoc with the storage lockers. Parts of the corridor were blackened and buckled outward. The contents of the lockers were scattered along the torn walls. The inner airlock was open, but was now several meters directly above us. I had to free-climb the last vertical expanse of corridor and toss the rope down to the others, while I crouched just within the inner lock. Jumping up onto the outer hull and pulling myself out into the bright sunlight, I reached into the red-lit airlock, found Aenea's wrist, and pulled her out. A second later, I did the same for Bettik. Then we all took time to look around. I have not actually read Olympus and Ilium yet. I have them. I'm looking at them. They're looking at me. They're gazing at me with scorn. They're on the list. I will get to them. The idea the general setup behind those sounded really good to me. So I will get to them. I'm just trying to chip away at some of my other backlog before I get to it. Right now I'm reading through a book called, what's it called? Flux by Jinwoo Chang? I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head. It's interesting. It takes about 200-something pages to start really getting to the point. In terms of plot development, mostly it's like character study. It's very disjointedly told. It's good, though. It's very good. But, Jinwoo Chang, maybe? I can't make it out from here. I will get around to Olympus and Ilium, though. They are very much on the list. A strange new world. I will never be able to explain the thrill that jolted through me at that moment, despite our crash, despite our predicament, despite everything. I was looking at a new world. The effect on me was more profound than I had expected in all my anticipation of interworld travel. This planet was very Hyperion-like. Breathable air, blue sky, although a much lighter blue than Hyperion's lapis. Wisps of clouds overhead, the river behind us, wider than the river had been on Renaissance Vector, and jungle on both banks, stretching as far away as I could see to the right and back beyond the overgrown Farcaster portal to our left. Ahead of us, the bow of the ship had indeed plowed up the river bottom and beached itself on a sandy spit, and then the jungle began again, hanging over everything like a tattered green curtain above a narrow stage. But as familiar as this sounds, it was all strange. The scents in the air were alien, the gravity felt odd, the sunlight was a bit too bright, the trees in the jungle were unlike anything I had ever seen. Feathery green gymnosperms was how I would have described them then. And overhead, flights of frail white birds of a sort I had never seen flapped away from the sound of our clumsy entrance to this world. We walked up the hull toward the beach. Soft breezes ruffled Aenea's hair and tugged at my shirt. The air smelled of subtle spices, traces of cinnamon and thyme, perhaps, although softer and richer than these. The bow of the ship was not transparent from the outside, although I did not know at the time whether the ship had opaqued its skin again, or whether it never looked transparent from the outside. Or whether it never looked transparent from the outside. There we go. Even lying on its side, the hull would have been too high and too steep to slide from if it had not plowed such a deep furrow in the beach sand. But as it was, I used my rope again to lower A. Bettik to the sand. Then we lowered the girl, and finally I shouldered my pack, the plasma rifle folded and strapped atop it, and slid down on my own, rolling as I hit the tightly packed soil. My first footstep on an alien world, and it was no footstep at all, just a mouthful of sand. The girl and the android helped me to my feet. Aenea was squinting up at the hull.
"How do we get back up?"
she said. "We can build a ladder, drag a fallen tree over, or," I tapped my pack, "I brought the hawking mat." We turned our attention to the beach and jungle. The former was narrow, only a few meters across from the bow to the forest, the sand gleaming more red than sand-colored in the bright sunlight. And the latter was dense and dark. The breeze was cool here on the beach, but the heat was palpable under the thickly packed trees. 20 meters above, the gymnosperm fronds rustled and quaked like the antennae of some great insects. "Wait here a minute," I said, and stepped under the cover of the trees. The underbrush was thick, a type of clinging fern for the most part, and the soil was made up of so much humus that it was more sponge than dirt. The jungle smelled of dampness and decay, but of a whole different sort than the fens and swamps of Hyperion. I thought of the Dracula ticks and biting gar in my own little tame bit of wilderness, and watched where I stepped. Vines spiraled down from the gymnosperm trunks and created a ropey latticework ahead of me in the gloom. I realized that I should have added a machete to my list of basic gear. I had not penetrated the woods 10 meters when suddenly a tall shrub holding heavy red leaves a meter in front of my face exploded into motion, and the leaves flapped away beneath the jungle canopy, the creature's leathery wings sounding much like the large fruit bats our Hyperion ancestors had brought on their seed ships. "Damn," I whispered, and shoved and battered my way out of the dank jungle. My shirt was torn when I staggered onto the beach sand. Aenea and Bettik looked expectantly at me. "It's a jungle in there," I said. We walked to the water's edge, sat on a partially submerged stump there, and looked at our spaceship. The poor thing looked like a great beached whale from some old Earth wildlife holo. "I wonder if it'll ever fly again," I mused, breaking a chocolate bar into pieces and handing one to the child and the other to the blue-skinned man. "Oh, I think it will. Oh, I think I will." "Oh, I think I will," said a voice on my wrist. I admit that I levitated a dozen or so centimeters. I'd forgotten about the comlog bracelet. "Ship?" I said, raising my wrist and speaking directly into the bracelet the way I would have used a portable radio in the Home Guard. "You don't have to do that," said the ship's voice. "I can hear everything quite clearly, thank you. Your question was, would I ever fly again? The answer is, almost certainly. I had more complicated repairs to carry out upon my arrival in the city of Endymion after my return to Hyperion." "Good," I said. "I'm glad you can, repair yourself. Will you need raw materials? Replacement parts?" "No, thank you, Endymion," said the ship. "It is mostly a matter of reallocating existing materials and redesigning certain damaged units. The repairs should not take long." "How long is not long?" asked Aenea. She finished her chocolate and licked her fingers. 6 standard months," said the ship, "unless I run into unforeseen difficulties." The three of us exchanged glances. I looked back at the jungle. The sun seemed lower now, its horizontal rays illuminating the tops of the gymnosperms and casting the shadows beneath into deeper gloom. 6 months, I said, "unless I run into unforeseen difficulties," repeated the ship. "Ideas?" I said to my 2 comrades. Aenea rinsed her fingers in the river's edge, tossed some water onto her face, and brushed back her wet hair. "We're on the River Tethys," she said. We'll just go downstream until we find the next Farcaster portal." "You can do that trick again?" I said. She brushed water from her face and said, "What trick?" I made a dismissive gesture with my hand. "Oh, nothing. Making a machine work that's been dead for 3 centuries. That trick." Her dark eyes were earnest. "I wasn't sure that I could do that, Raul." She looked at Bettik, who was watching us impassively. "Honest." "What would have happened if you hadn't been able to do it?" I asked softly. "They would have caught us," said Aenea. "I think they would have let you 2 go. They would have brought me back to Pachem. That would have been the last you or anyone else would have ever heard of me." Something about the flat, emotionless way she said it gave me chills. Let's try that again with flatness and emotionlessness. "They would have caught us," said Aenea. "I think they would have let you 2 go. They would have brought me back to Pachem. That would have been the last you or anyone else would have heard of me." Something about the flat, emotionless way she said that gave me chills. "All right," I said. "It worked. But how did you do it?" She made that slight movement of her hand gesture with which I was becoming familiar. "I'm not certain," she said. "I knew from the dreams that the portal would probably let me through." "Let you through?" I said. "Yes. I thought it would recognize me, and it did." I set my hands on my knees and straightened my legs, the heels of my boots digging into the red sand. "You talk about the Farcaster as if it's an intelligent living organism," I said. Aenea looked back at the arch half a click behind us. "In a way it is," she said. "It's hard to explain." "But you're sure that the Pack's troops can't follow us through?" "Oh, yes. The portal will not activate for anyone else." My eyebrows raised a bit. Then how did Bettik and I, and the ship, get through? Aenea smiled.
You were with me.
I stood up. All right, we'll hash this out later. First, I think we need a plan. Do we reconnoiter now, or get our stuff out of the ship first? Aenea looked down at the dark water of the river.
And then Robinson Crusoe, stripped naked, swam out to his ship, filled his pockets with biscuits, and swam back to shore.
What? I said, hefting my pack and frowning at the child.
Nothing, she said, getting to her feet. Just an old pre-Hedgera book that Uncle Martin used to read to me. He used to say that proofreaders have always been incompetent assholes, even 1400 years ago.
I looked at the android. Do you understand her, Bettik? He showed that slight twitch of his thin lips that I was learning to take as a smile. It is not my role to understand Aenea, Endymion. I sighed. All right, back to the subject. Do we reconnoiter before it gets dark, or dig the stuff out of the ship?
I vote that we look around, said Aenea.
She looked at the darkening jungle.
But not through that stuff.
I agreed, pulling the hawking mat from its place atop my pack and unrolling it on the sand. We'll see if this works on this world. I paused, raised the comm log closer. What world is this, anyway? Ship? There was a second's hesitation, as if the ship was busy mulling over its own problems. I'm sorry, I can't identify it given the state of my memory banks. My navigation systems could tell us, of course, but I will need a star sighting. I can tell you that there are no unnatural electromagnetic or microwave transmissions currently broadcasting on this area of the planet, nor are there any relay satellites or other man-made objects in synchronous orbit overhead. All right, I said, but where are we? I looked at the girl. How should I know? Said Aenea. You brought us here, I said. I realized that I was being short-tempered with her, but I felt short-tempered right then. Aenea shook her head. I just activated the Farcaster roll. My big plan was to get away from Father Captain What's-His-Name and all those ships. That was it. And find your architect, I said. Yes, said Aenea. I looked around the jungle and river. It doesn't look like a promising place to find an architect. I guess you're right. We'll just have to keep moving down the river to the next world. The vine-shrouded arch of the Farcaster we'd passed through caught my eye. I saw now why we'd plowed ashore. The river took a bend to the right here, about 1/2 kilometer from the portal. The ship had come through and just kept going straight, right up through the shallows and onto the beach. Wait, I said, couldn't we just reprogram that portal and use it to go somewhere else? Why do we have to go find another one? Bettik stepped away from the ship so he could get a better look at the Farcaster arch. The River Tethys portals did not work like the millions of personal Farcasters, he said softly, nor was it designed to function like the Grand Concourse portals or the large spaceborne Farcasters. He reached into his pocket and removed a small book. I saw the title, A Traveler's Guide to the World Web. It seems that the Tethys was designed primarily for wandering and relaxation, he said. The distance between the portals varied from a few kilometers to many hundreds of kilometers. Hundreds of kilometers? I said. I had been expecting to find the next portal just around the next bend in the river. Yes, continued Bettik, the concept, as I understand it, was to offer the traveler a wide variety of worlds, views, and experiences. To that end, only the downstream portals would activate, and they programmed themselves randomly. That is, the sections of river on different worlds were shuffled constantly, like so many cards in a deck. I shook my head. In the old poets' cantos it says that the rivers were sliced up after the fall, that they dried up like water holes in the desert. Aenea made a noise. Uncle Martin's full of shit sometimes, Raul. He never saw what happened to the Tethys after the fall. He was on Hyperion, remember? He's never been back to the web. He made stuff up. And this is our first big red blinking light warning sign that everything you know is at least suspect, if not wrong. It's actually kind of a brilliant conceit, being like, hey, here's stuff that I want to retcon. How do I do it? By saying that the previous book was actually written by the guy, and he didn't get everything right, because he's an unreliable narrator. It is fairly brilliant. It is a great lamp shading, hand waving, whatever. So there's going to be some things that we think we know that aren't entirely correct or are less correct than we think they are. So it keeps you on your toes. But you'd be amazed how rarely that winds up being relevant. Mostly because it's like all about the adventure. It's quite fun. The journey is the thing. It was no way to talk about the greatest work of literature in the past 300 years, or of the legendary old poet who had composed it, but I started laughing and then found it hard to stop. By the time I did, Aenea was looking at me strangely. "Are you all right, Raul?" "Yep," I said. "Just happy." I turned and made a motion that encompassed the jungle, the river, and the Farcaster portal, even our beached whale of a ship. "For some reason, I'm just happy," I said. Aenea nodded, as if she understood perfectly. To the android, I said, "Does the book say what world this is? Jungle, blue sky. It must be about 9.5 on the Solmev scale. That must be fairly rare. Does it list this world?" Bettik flipped through the pages. "I don't remember a jungle world like this mentioned in the sections I read, Endymion. I will read more carefully later." "Well, I think we need to look around," said Aenea, obviously impatient to explore. "But we should salvage some important things from the ship first," I said. "I made a list." "That could take hours," said Aenea. "The sun could set before we're finished." "Still," I said, ready to argue, "we need to get organized here." "If I may suggest a course of action," Bettik interrupted softly, "perhaps you and Aenea could, reconnoiter while I begin removing the necessary items you mentioned, unless you think it wiser to sleep in the ship tonight." We all looked at the poor ship. The river swirled around it, and just above the water level I could see the bent and blackened stumps, which had been the proud rear fins. I thought of sleeping in that tumble of stuff, in the red-lit emergency light or the absolute darkness of the central levels, and said, "Well, it would be safer in there, but let's get the stuff out that we'll need to move downriver, and then we'll decide." The android and I discussed it for several minutes. I had the plasma rifle with me, as well as the .45 in its holster on my belt, but I wanted the 16-gauge shotgun I'd set aside, as well as the camping gear I'd seen in the EVA locker closet. I wasn't sure how we'd get downriver. The hawking mat would probably hold the three of us, but I couldn't see it transporting us and our gear, so we decided to unpack 3 of the 4 flybikes from their niches under the spacesuit closet. There was also a flying belt in there that I thought might be handy, as well as some camping accessories such as a heating cube, sleeping bags, foam mats, flashlight lasers for each of us, and the headset communicators I'd noticed. "Oh, and a machete if you see one," I added. There were several boxes of knives and multi-use blades in the small EVA closet. I don't remember a machete, but if there is one, let's get it out. Bettik and I walked to the end of the narrow beach, found a fallen tree at the river's edge, and dragged it, with me sweating and cursing, back to the side of the ship to act as a de facto ladder so we could crawl back up on the curved hull. "Oh yeah, see if there's a rope ladder in that mess," I said, "and an inflatable raft of some sort." "Anything else?" Bettik asked wryly. "No. Well, maybe a sauna if you find one, and a well-stocked bar, and maybe a 12-piece band to play some music while we unpack." "I'll do my best, sir," said the android, and began climbing the tree ladder back to the top of the hull. I felt guilty leaving Bettik to do all the heavy lifting, but it seemed wise to know how far it was to get to the next Farcaster portal, and I had no intention of allowing the girl to fly off on a scouting mission of her own. She sat behind me as I tapped the activator thread designs on the carpet. Oh boy. She sat behind me as I tapped the activator thread designs, and the carpet stiffened and rose several centimeters from the wet sand. "Wick," she said. "What?" "It stands for wicked," said the girl. "Uncle Martin said that it was kid slang when he was a brat on old Earth." I sighed again and tapped the flight threads. We spiraled up and around, soon rising above the treetop level. The sun was definitely lower now in the direction I assumed was west. "Ship, I said to my comlog bracelet. Yes. Yes. The ship's tone always made me feel that I was interrupting it at some important task. Am I talking to you or to the databank you downloaded? As long as you are within communicator range, Endymion, it answered, you are talking to me. What's the communicator range? We leveled off 30 meters above the river. Bettik waved from where he stood next to the open airlock. 20,000 kilometers or the curve of the planet, said the ship, whichever comes first. As I mentioned earlier, there are no relay satellites around this world that I can locate. I tapped the forward design and we began flying upriver toward the overgrown arch there. Can you talk to me through a Farcaster portal? I asked. An activated portal? Said the ship. How could I do that, Endymion? You would be light years away. The ship had a way of making me feel stupid and provincial. I usually enjoyed its company, but I admit I wouldn't mind too much when we left it behind. Aenea leaned against my back and spoke directly into my ear so as to be heard over the wind noise as we accelerated.
The old portals used to have fiber optic lines running through them. That worked, although not as well as the fat line.
So if we wanted to keep talking to the ship when we go downriver, I said back over my shoulder, we could string telephone wire? Out of the corner of my eye, I could see her grinning. The silliness did give me a thought, however. If we can't go back upriver through the portals, I said, how do we find our way back to the ship? Aenea put her hand on my shoulder. The portal was approaching quickly now.
We just keep going down the line until we come back around, she said over the wind noise. The River Tethys was a big circle.
I turned so that I could see her. Are you serious, kiddo? There were, what, a couple of 100 worlds connected by the Tethys.
At least a couple of 100, said Aenea, that we know of.
I did not understand that, but sighed again as we slowed near the portal. If each section of the river ran for 100 clicks, that's 20,000 kilometers of travel just to get back here. Aenea said nothing. I hovered us near the portal, realizing for the first time just how massive these things were. The arch appeared to be made of metal with many designs, compartments, indentations, perhaps even cryptic writing, but the jungle had sent tendrils of vines and lichens up to the top and sides of the thing. What I had first taken as rust on the complicated arch had turned out to be more of the red bat-wing leaves, hanging in clusters from the main tangle of vines. I gave them a wide berth. That's really annoying. I'll have to check on that later. What if it activates? I said as we hovered a meter or two short of the underside of the arch.
Try it, said the girl.
I sent the hawking mats forward slowly, almost stopping as the front of the carpet reached the invisible line directly under the arch. Nothing happened. We flew through. I turned the mat around, and we came back from the south. The Farcaster portal was just an ornate metal bridge arching high over the river. It's dead, I said, as dead as Kelsey's nuts. It had been one of Grandam's favorite phrases, used only when we kids weren't supposed to be able to hear, but I realized there was a kid in earshot. Sorry, I said over my shoulder, my face red. Perhaps I'd spent too many years in the army or working with river bargemen or as a bouncer in the casinos. I'd turned into a jerk. Aenea actually threw her head back. She was laughing so hard. Raul, she said, I grew up visiting Uncle Martin, remember? We flew back over the ship and waved at Bettik as the android was lowering pallets of gear to the beach. He waved a blue hand in response. Shall we go on downriver to see how far it'll be to the next portal? I said.
Absolutely, said Aenea.
We flew downriver, seeing very few other beaches or breaks in the jungle. Trees and vines came all the way to the river's edge. It bothered me not to know which direction we were heading, so I removed the inertial guidance compass from my pack and activated it. The compass had been my guide on Hyperion, where the magnetic field was too treacherous to trust. But it was useless here. As with the ship's guidance system, the compass would work perfectly if it knew its starting point, but that luxury had been lost the instant we transited the Farcaster. "Ship," I said to the bracelet comlog, "can you get a magnetic compass reading on us?" "Yes," came the instant reply, "but without knowing precisely where magnetic north is on this world, the actual direction of travel would be a rough estimate." "Give me a rough estimate, please." I banked the mat slightly as we rounded a wide bend. The river had broadened out again. It must have been almost a kilometer wide at this point. The current looked swift, but not especially treacherous. My barge work on the cons had taught me to read the river for eddies, snags, sandbars, and the like. This river seemed easy enough to navigate. "You are headed approximately east-southeast," said the comlog. "Airspeed is 68 kilometers per hour. Sensors indicate that your Hawking mat deflection field is at 8%. Altitude is—" All right, I said. "East-southeast." The sun was lowering behind us. The world revolved like old Earth and Hyperion. The river straightened out, and I accelerated the mat a bit. In the labyrinths on Hyperion, I'd been scooting along at almost 300 clicks per hour, but I wasn't eager to fly that fast here unless I had to. The flight threads in this old mat held a charge for quite a while, but there was no need to run it out quicker than necessary. I made a mental note to recharge the threads from the ship's leads before we left, even if we took the skybikes as transportation. "Look," said Aenea, pointing to our left. Far to the north, illuminated by the now visibly setting sun, something like a mesa top or some very large man-made thing broke through the jungle canopy. "Can we go look?" she said. I knew better. We had an objective, we had a time limit, the setting sun, for one, and we had 1,000 reasons not to take chances by swooping around strange artifacts. For all we knew, this mesa or tower thing was the Central Pack's headquarters for the planet. "Sure," I said, mentally kicking myself for being an idiot, and banked the Hawking mat to the north. The thing was farther north than it seemed. I kicked the mat up to 200 clicks per hour, and we spent a good 10 minutes flying to it. "Excuse me, Endymion," came the ship's voice on my wrist, "but you appear to have gone off course and are now headed north-northeast, approximately 103 degrees from your former heading." "We're investigating a tower or butte or something poking up from the jungle almost due north of us," I said. "Do you have it on your radar?" "Negative," said the ship, and I thought I heard a hint of dryness in its tone again. "My vantage point here, stuck in the mud, is not optimum. Anything below a 28-degree inclination from the horizon is lost in clutter. You are just within my angle of detection. Another 20 kilometers north, and I will lose you." "That's all right," I said. "We're just going to check this out and get right back to the river." "Why?" said the ship. "Why investigate something which has nothing to do with your plans to travel downriver?" Aenea leaned over and lifted my wrist. "We're human," she said. The ship did not reply. The thing, when we finally reached it, rose a sheer 100 meters above the jungle canopy. Its lower levels were surrounded so tightly by the giant gymnosperms that the tower looked like a weathered crag rising from a green sea. It appeared to be both natural and man-made, or at least modified by some intelligence. The tower was about 70 meters across and appeared to be made of red rock, perhaps some type of sandstone. The setting sun, only 10 degrees or so above the jungle canopy horizon now, bathed the crag in a rich red light. Here and there along the east and west faces of the crag were openings that both Aenea and I first thought were natural, wind or water-hewn, but we soon realized had been carved. Also on the east side were niches carved. Where's the other hyphen there? Yes, no, I had that right the second time. Also on the east side were niches carved, niches about the right distance from one another to be steps and handholds for human feet and hands. But they were shallow, narrow niches, and the thought of free climbing that 100-plus meter crag with nothing but such shallow toe and finger holds made my insides clench. "Can we go closer?" asked Aenea. I had been keeping the hawking mat about 50 meters out as we circled. I don't think we should, I said. We're already within firearms range. I don't want to tempt anyone or anything with a spear or a bow and arrows.
A bow could pick us off at this range, she said, but did not insist on flying closer.
For a second, I thought I saw... That is what it says. I don't know if that's a weird edit or something. Oh. I just misinterpreted it.
A bow could pick us off at this range, she said.
No. A bow could pick us off at this range. Yeah, it's emphasis on this. Whatever. I'm losing it. I had been keeping the hawking mat about 50 meters out as we circled. I don't think we should, I said. We're already within firearms range. I don't want to tempt anyone or anything with a spear or a bow and arrows. With a spear or a bow and arrows.
A bow could pick us off at this range, she said,
but did not insist on flying closer. For a second, I thought I saw a glimmer of something moving within one of the oval openings carved in the red rock, but an instant later I decided it was a trick of the evening light. Had enough? I said.
Not really,
said Aenea. Her small hands were holding onto my shoulders as we banked. The breeze ruffled my short hair, and when I looked back I could see the girl's hair streaming behind her. We need to get back to business, though, I said, aiming the hawking mat south toward the river and accelerating again. The gymnosperm canopy looked soft, feathery, and deceptively continuous 40 meters beneath us. As if we could land on it if we had to. A pang of tension filled me as I thought of the consequences if we had to. But Abe Bettik has the flying belt and fly bikes, I thought. He can come and fetch us if he has to. We intercepted the river again, a click or so southeast of where we had left it, and we could see the 30 clicks or so to the horizon. No Farcaster portal. Which way? I said.
Let's go a bit farther.
I nodded and banked left, staying out over the river. We had seen no signs of animal life other than the occasional white bird and red bat plant things. I was thinking of the footsteps in the side of the red monolith when Aenea tugged at my sleeve and pointed almost straight downward. Something very large was moving just under the surface of the river. The low sunlight reflecting from the water hid most of the details from us, but I could make out leathery skin, something that might have been a barbed tail, and fins or cilia on the side. The creature must have been 8 to 10 meters long. It dived, and we were past before I could see any more detail.
That was like a river manta. That was sort of like a river manta,
called Aenea over my shoulder. We were moving quickly again, and the sound of the wind against the rising deflection field made some noise. Bigger, I said. I had harnessed and worked with river mantas, and I'd never seen one that long or broad. Suddenly, the hawking mat seemed very frail and insubstantial. I brought us 30 meters lower. We were flying almost at tree level now, so that a fall would not necessarily be fatal if the ancient flying carpet decided to quit on us without warning. We banked south around another bend, noticed the river narrowing rapidly, and soon were greeted with a roar and a wall of rising spray. The waterfall was not overly spectacular. It fell only 10 to 15 meters, but a huge volume of water was dropping over it. The click-wide river pressed between rock cliffs to a width of only 100 meters or so, and the force expended there was impressive. Below, there was another rapids over the rocks of the tumbled falls, then a wide pool, and then the river grew wide and relatively placid again. For a second, I wondered stupidly if the river critter we'd seen was prepared for this sudden drop. I don't think we're going to find the portal in time to get back before dark, I said over my shoulder to the girl. If there's a portal downriver at all.
It's there,
said Aenea. We've come at least 100 clicks, I said.
Abe Bettik said that the Tethys sections averaged that. This one might be 200 or 300 kilometers between portals. Besides, there were numerous portals along the various rivers. The sections of the river varied in length even on the same world.
Who told you that? I asked, twisting to look at her.
My mother. She was a detective, you know. She once had a divorce case where she followed a married guy and his girlfriend for 3 weeks on the River Tethys.
What's a divorce case? I asked.
Never mind.
Aenea scooted around so that she was facing backward, her legs still crossed. Her hair whipped around her face.
You're right. Let's get back to Bettik and the ship. We'll come this way tomorrow.
I banked us around and accelerated toward the west. We crossed over the falls and laughed as the spray wet our faces and hands.
Endymion?
Endymion, said the comlog. It was not the ship's voice, but Bettik's. Yes, I said, we're heading back. We're about 25-30 minutes out.
I know, came the android's calm voice. I was watching the tower, the waterfall, and all the rest in the hollow pit.
Aenea and I looked at each other with what must have been comical expressions. You mean this comlog thing sends back pictures?
Of course, came the ship's voice. Hollow or video. We have been monitoring on hollow. Although the viewing is a bit odd, said Bettik, since the hollow pit is now an indentation in the wall. But I was not calling just to check your progress.
What then? I said.
We appear to have a visitor, said Bettik. A big river thing? Called Aenea. Sort of like a manta, only bigger? Not exactly, came Bettik's calm voice. It is the Shrike.
And on that dramatic note, we will end it for today. It is looking likely that Friday will be a bust. I do not know for sure. I will need another day or two to find out. I will post information as I have it. We'll figure it out. Again, I'm not terribly thrilled that my schedule is no longer regular and reliable. I realize that is going to make it difficult for most people to tune in unless you constantly check the Discord, which you shouldn't have to do. So I will be working to get that stabilized, and we'll go from there. I will generally do it at around the same time every day. I will try to shoot for noon East Coast time, U.S. East Coast time. It may not always be possible, but we'll see. Anything else salient I can think of? No, not really. Pretty soon I'll have to just set up the slideshow, but we'll stick with single covers for a little while. Yeah, so thanks for tuning in. We've got quite a lot more book to go through. So don't worry, we'll be at this a while. Yeah, we're maybe not a quarter yet. 1/6 to 1/5 of the way through. Closer to 1/5, probably. 1, 2... Let's see. Yeah, probably like 1/5 of the way through. That's the 2 books. We're probably like a bit more than 1/3 of the way through the first half. No, the first volume book. The first book. Frig. So the edition I'm working with is the Endymion Omnibus, which has both Endymion and The Rise of Endymion in it. So it's technically 2 books. They are all one contiguous story. We're actually, I take that back, it's more like halfway through the first book. The second book's a little bit longer. But yeah, we're making headway. Anyway, with that, I'm going to leave you all. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other. See you all next time, whenever that winds up being. I'll try to know within the next day or 2 if it'll wind up being Friday or not. Failing that, I'll post it. I will also get the, whatchamacallums, the playlist updated and set. I'll probably just set it up as Endymion, and then the broader one for the year will be Fraggoth Reads 2026. And we'll go from there. Alrighty. See you all then.
whenever later winds up being. Toodaloo.